Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the podcast that celebrates classic, cult, and current films and the people that made them and many other aspects of pop culture. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer's Ben Shrewsbury, and our signature theme was composed by Greg Lehrhoff. Here it's always Saturday night, and our mission is to chronicle film and pop cultural history one memory at a time. Tonight, we are delighted to welcome Kevin Goetz, the founder and CEO of Screen Engine, a global leader in entertainment research and strategy, serving all major film studios, television networks, and streaming services. In many ways, his work can determine how successful a film can become in today's marketplace. He's also the author of a terrific new book entitled How to Score in Hollywood, with some wonderful tips for today's filmmakers, and he's produced 12 television movies, including the Emmy-winning Wild Iris. Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, Kevin.
I'm thrilled to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me.
You know, Hollywood right now is going through what I would consider to be a tumultuous period. It's quoted incessantly that we've gone through COVID, we've gone through strikes, and now the big news in town is who will acquire Warner Brothers, a further consolidation of the film business. Um, the LA Times this morning was talking about thousands of more jobs. People are leaving the state because they can't find work here. How do you feel about this? I mean, you've been in the business for many years, as I've been, and I've never seen the business so fraught with tension. Do you feel it?
You know, I of course I feel it. I don't subscribe to it. I don't think that it's doom and gloom. I think that there's so much opportunity that's going to present itself. None of us know what's going to happen specifically with the Warner Brothers deal. My hopefulness, my optimism tells me that whatever the outcome it's going to be good. It's going to be I think we'll have more theatrical films at the end of the day than we even have now. Not by a lot, because I don't think it's about volume as much as where consumer behavior is heading, which is actually even more people going to the movies, but seeing far fewer films. So it really is about what kind of movies they're making, how, as I like to say, elevated they might be to warrant that value proposition of it's worth it to leave my house to see that. And that is a direct result of a confluence, really, of three things that have happened over the last disruption, which is the streaming disruption. Because you're right, we've been through, it's the end of the business with from silence to talkies, the advent of radio. Television was going to kill the movie industry. The VHS, first the beta, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, then DVRs. None of that happened. But with the streaming disruption, something interesting has occurred. There's a confluence of three things: cost, convenience, and choice that have really merged together in a way that we haven't seen. So I agree with that. But that doesn't mean that you can't excel, that you can't, I was about to say survive, but more than survive, that you can flourish. You just have to pivot with the new way that consumers want to um, immerse themselves in entertainment.
I I've been studying this a lot lately. Being a filmmaker myself, out there in the marketplace trying to sell every day, and I wonder what is Hollywood buying? I have it's become a bit of a cliche around here. I want more fun. I want more fun. I want wicked fun. I want Barbie fun. I want movies that when you walk out of the theater, well, if you're not dancing down the street, you're at least feeling really good. Now, this is the time of year, we're now in December. This is the time of the year when the studios and the streamers, they bring out their awards-worthy product. And I know it's a terrible simplification, but I talk about the era of or the season of depressing movies. Great acting. Don't get me wrong. There's wonderful
But not
performance,
terribly fun.
but not terribly fun. One film after another just seems to be. And again, it seems to be, and it's so funny. This morning, the LA Times, I think it was the LA Times, or somebody was talking with Albert Brooks, who's in this new movie, El McKay, I think it's called.
Ella McKay,
Ellen McKay, and
Jim Brooks's movie. Yes.
he's talking about the fact that comedy has been relegated to the streaming world. We very seldom see a theatrical release comedy evermore. Now, I'm a comedy writer. Hearing that is a bit depressing, but then I've been hearing it for years. When you came on our other show last week, Tales from Hollywoodland, it was such a fun time having you on. We didn't actually get into comedy at all. I was glad because I wanted to save it for this show because I love comedy. I love to laugh. Yet there's very seldom an opportunity to laugh. And I've heard all of the reasons that we're not seeing more comedies in the theaters, that the studios aren't backing comedies. First of all, they're usually original, which means they're not a prequel, sequel, reboot. Also, there's this theory that American comedy does not work overseas, that if you're in Malaysia, if you're in India, they don't want to see American comedies. I say to my writing partner, well, wait a second, there's 300 million people in North America. They deserve those comedies. Can't we figure out a way? Also, comedy doesn't cost $100 million a pop, or it shouldn't. And there's ways of doing it. But I'm curious, in your travels, you've researched a lot of comedies over the years. Obviously, there are less comedies today. What is your feeling about comedy making a comedy comeback?
Well, comedies have not left. They just aren't being made by studios because the economics, as you laid out, are more challenging to to make money worldwide. That is true. Now, comedy adventures, like a Jumanji or something like that, still work very well. I think Anaconda is going to open pretty decently, for example, respectably. And look,
Wait, I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Kevin. You just said Anaconda. I recall the original being a horror movie. Are you saying the new Anaconda is a
it's a
comedy?
comedy. Yeah,
Really?
it's a meta comedy. It's really it takes makes fun of its own property, and which is really clever and fun.
So I have to quote you from your own book. You refer to a type of film called a feathered fish. Would
Yes.
you say Anaconda as a comedy would be a
No,
feather?
no,
No.
it's not a feathered fish at all. It's a reimagination of just the IP Anaconda, but they're making a movie about Anaconda. And so it's tongue in cheek, it's funny, but it's irreverent. It's entertaining. It's everything that you want, Steve.
Fun. Thank you.
But let me just mention to you, let's start with the word fun before we go to funny. Fun is a word that is the single most important thing in a theatrical movie working. The element of fun, elevated fun. Now, fun means different things to different people. You said it's the year of the end of the year is the season of the depression or whatever. I say those are my favorite movies. That is fun for me. But fun meaning a fun elevated drama, a fun elevated zombie movie, Sinners, a fun elevated special effects, AI Avatar, a fun animated elevated movie, Zootopia, a fun musical elevated, Wicked. Those take on a life that gives you a reason, as I said, to leave your home. The fun quotient is elevated. And if you don't have that, you are already at a disadvantage. To get a comedies, there's many different genres of comedy, right? There's slapstick, there's romantic comedies, there's, teen comedies, there's spoofs, there's satire. And so to say comedies don't work or is too general a statement because the streamers are making a lot of what you would define as a comedy. You may be upset that they're not theatrical, but are a lot of them because people still really love them. All right. But that being said, when there is one that really works and breaks through, suddenly comedies won't be dead anymore because we've yet to crack in recent memory, the last couple of years, a comedy that is really elevated, like a Crazy Rich Asians, for example. Like when we have another one of those, you'll see more being greenlit, I imagine. Hollywood is a product of listening to consumers and hopefully fulfilling on the delivery of what people want. I remember being on an LGBTQ panel years ago, and it was Dustin Lance Black and myself and an old theater director, and the old theater director was on one side and I was on the other. Lance was in the middle, and people were saying, well, people aren't listening or watching LGBTQ themed movies, and except Brokeback Mountain, which had just come out not too long ago. And then I said, look, guys, ladies, uh, if LGBTQ movies made money, that's all you'd be seeing. In other words, right from your heart. But if you want to, um, y- you know, make a living and make a decent living, have a diversity of product, have a diversity of genres. Uh, and so I say that about comedies too. It don't just write them off, but they are more challenging from a theatrical standpoint, which just makes total logical sense when you look at what you said about traveling overseas when international has essentially been the replacement for the additional windows now.
Mm.
Like there's so much depending on the success. You're right. You can make it for not that much, let's say, but you still have to market it with that much.
See, that's an interesting point that I talk to my friends about. The costs of marketing movies to a national audience in the US seem to be just going up every year to the point where, let's say I make a well, I worked on the sequel, so I'll mention Porky's from 1982. Porky's was the first comedy to gross $100 million in the US. I was assigned to Porky's 2 as unit publicist. So I
It was
was writing
Fox, right?
at Fox,
And they didn't
exactly.
even want to make it originally.
And it was they acquired it. It was like a Canadian film. It was like $3 million, if that. And it went on to gross $100 million. But I think that today the studios are, well, it depends. I was going to say that at certain points, the studios don't want to spend $30 million to market a film nationally that costs three. But then you look at the horror film market. Horror films are traditionally low budget. The big hit this past season was a couple of films in the Terrifier franchise, which were made for almost nothing. The second and third one, I think, were made for more money. But the studios seem to be interested in spending the dollars for horror because apparently it does come back to them.
Well, yes, and horror is certainly we know can be made more economically often because the I think the theme of horror, the scares, the etc., are the star rather than actual stars. So the above the line is probably a lot lower than the below the line on many horror movies. But again, there's a lot of horror movies that don't see the light of day. There's a lot of horror movies that are not elevated. Five Nights at Freddy's, did you see the disparity between the critics and the audience scores? The critics are like the lowest I've seen in a teen number compared to the delta between the audience score, which is like 85 or something. Like, I don't know if we have that exact, but you get my point. It is such a disconnect between the people writing the reviews and the audiences who are responding to it. They also want fun and they're getting it with that movie.
Oh yeah, the horror market is alive and well. I think particularly thriving in what are considered to be difficult times. It's funny when you go back to the 1930s during the Great Depression, horror films really didn't exist much. There were a few, but comedy, slapstick comedy was king. At times when you're really depressed about the economy, people flock to the movie theaters. But then again, it's skewed because it probably cost a quarter to see a movie in 1931. Now, yeah.
It's yeah, totally. I want to mention I'm kind of obsessed with Doris Kearns Goodwin. I think she's an extraordinary
All
writer.
right.
I went to see her speak within the year, and it was promoting a new book. And somebody asked a question from the audience and saying, with Donald Trump as president, we've never seen it more polarizing. We feel like it's the end of democracy, and all this other stuff that many people say, particularly non-MAGA folks. And she said, I have documented and seen so many it's the end of democracy conversations over the course of the 20th century, from World War One to World War Two, to the end of World War Two, dropping of the atom bomb, to the 60s and McCarthyism, in the 50s, to the 60s of Kennedy's and Martin Luther King, those assassinations, the country at a cultural crossroad, Watergate in the 70s, the end of democracy, you know? She said, this is really not that different than any of those conversations in their time. So I say to you, Steve, I wouldn't look at our business as the death knell, or people love entertainment. They love it. It's just that the ecosystem has been redefined and is continuing to redefine itself. In our business lifetimes, Steve, you and I have never really seen, beside the last 7, 8 years, the consumer in the driver's seat. For years, from the entire 20th century of movies to early aughts, etc., studios told us, here are 3 movies. You want to see them? See them. If you don't, lump it. You like it? Lump it. You know what I mean? Then there were street dates of videos, and if you didn't like them, you didn't see them. And everyone sort of went like lemmings and went to the theater or didn't go. And they went to the movies. Now people are viewing the entire ecosystem, the 2 younger generations, meaning Gen Zs and millennials by and large, are seeing it as going to a movie, not the movies. So the nostalgia with the movie theater, which I love and you love, and so many of our brethren and associates and colleagues love. Kids love it too, but they don't need to do it. They don't need to go there. Only for very certain movies each year. And that number keeps decreasing, which is why I'm on record saying that I don't think it ever comes back to where it was. I don't think it can, because of the sheer magnitude of choice, of convenience, and cost. Think, if you will, that we were brainwashed 15 years ago of this notion of moviegoing is the cheapest form of entertainment. But it's not cheap. It may be the cheapest form of entertainment outside the house where you can go out and leave your home. It's cheaper than a concert. It's cheaper than a Broadway musical. It's cheaper than a ballet or an opera. But is it cheap for a family of 4 to spend $80 on a night at the movies? No, it's not. And people started to get aware of cost, I think, during the 3D, advent of 3D, and also of big screen formats, large screen formats. Suddenly people are like, well, I guess I can pay that surcharge. Oh, that's added another $12 onto my bill or whatever. And so that, I think, changed the cost, the value proposition. Is that movie worth my time to leave my home to see it? And that benchmark has only risen. The cost part is what I just said. The convenience is obvious, not having to leave your home. And the choice, I mean, have you ever seen more great television content? And even movies,
it's
even movies
incredible.
on streamers. I mean, did you see Catherine Bigelow's movie? It's.
I did. It was quite a startling movie.
I'll tell you something. I can't get it out of my mind.
Yeah, another depressing movie. Thank you.
Well, I didn't see it as such. I mean, of course, I saw the theme of it as unnerving and I guess ultimately depressing, I suppose, without giving anything away. But I don't think it's. I thought it was very fun. I was on the edge of my seat, looking at the 3 perspectives that she shows. I thought it was just super cool. Again, the point being, though, there is really great choice
Oh,
out
there are
there.
great choices. And
And for that family of 4 who can buy 4 to 5 streaming services, for the same amount of money a month to go out one night, your criteria for that one night out of the movies is gonna be very high. So consider that. There's 800, 900, maybe 1,000 movies released every year. Each week there's 5 or 6 movies released, but you only are aware of maybe one or two of them. Most people are, and most barely get any traction.
Well, it's funny you should mention that about being aware. Like you, I grew up in the era of newspapers. On Friday, you'd open up the LA Times or the New York Times, and there would be a dozen full-page ads. I mean, there were so many movies coming out, and I'd say, I want to see that, I want to see that, I want to see that, I want to see that. I I don't see that anymore. Well, obviously, there are no ads in the LA Times. I mean, they don't even have, if you want to find the theater, you just go on the internet, which of course is the source for all of that information. Let's talk a little bit about the world of research. I was before I talk today, and you are such a dean in this arena. And listening to you and reading the book, by the way, everybody, you got to get this book. I I have to ask you though, did you bring in a research team to determine what the title of the book should be? Because How to Score in Hollywood is an interesting title,
Well,
considering
I've
that
spent
I
my
could.
life in the scoring business, polling audiences,
Right, of course, there's a
and
double
it
entendre
has
there.
a great irony to it. And yeah, I did test it. Of course, I tested my first title too, Audienceology. Uh, it came between Audienceology and Don't Kill the Messenger, my first book. So I used Don't Kill the Messenger for my podcast, and it's turned out really well. But both of those were the top testing. Simon and Schuster, my publisher, wanted Audienceology because they felt it was more of like a broader audience. We could build on that kind of brand. Extensions could happen from Audienceology, coining a phrase. How to Score in Hollywood is just has triple entendres. I mean, I think I actually think it's a great title. But if you're learning how to, what your way to the top, this is not the book for you. You'll have to go online to a porn site for that. But in all seriousness, it really is a decent playbook, hopefully more than decent, to understand what those like pink flags are, not the red flags necessarily, or even the yellow flags, but not the green ones, what you should be looking at, asking yourself before you shoot a frame of film.
Oh yeah, no, believe me, as a filmmaker, I love the book because
Thank you so much.
it's so much fun. It's so much fun to see what goes into it because yes, there are a lot of I go to these writing seminars occasionally and I hear from writers telling me what they're writing about and I say to myself, "Oh my God, one person is going to go watch that movie. You should know." And you
You
have a
got
chance.
it. You
You have
got it.
yeah,
You hit it right on the head.
yeah.
That's exactly what got me interested, Steve, in writing the book, because the second book is really about the screening process. And I've spent my life in movie theaters testing movies,
Right, of course.
so many different movies. But the second book was really sitting there night after night after night, wondering how the hell did anyone green light this at the budget that they shared with me before the movie? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense how anybody could have responsibly spent that much money on this movie. Whether it was the recruit ratio, that is to say, the number of invitations that it took to get one single body into a theater, which is very telling for the initial interest, right? To the scores just not being there because people are not liking it. You can understand a lot of that beforehand, sizing your audience appropriately. I can't tell you how many folks miss comp, poorly comp their movies. They use aspirational comps, and it's a problem.
Well, I've put up a poster from Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter
Oh no, it's
for a
from the
good
book. It's
for a
from the
good
book.
reason
Yeah.
because there's this phrase we have, what were they thinking? And I did not see the movie. To be honest, I am not speaking from the experience of watching it, but it seemed to be an odd bird I don't know if you define it as one of your feathered fish. I think you do actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And not only two areas, because I think it's a soup. It got me really interested in it seems very clever to me, but audiences didn't get that same irony. And I think Tony Sella talks about it, who did the marketing and advertising campaign on the picture. Talks about just how difficult it was to get something that would test with some kind of stickiness, because there were so
Right.
many ways to go with it. And you had to get over this title, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter.
I mean, you're talking about two audiences immediately. You've got your historical over 40 crowd that actually knows who Abraham Lincoln is. And then you've got your horror crowd who knows what a vampire hunter is. Getting those two crowds to come out, as you point out in your chapter on feathered fish, basically it's an uphill battle.
Well, I mean, looking at that picture on the my right with the axe in the back and the head, anyone with historical interest, I can't imagine them saying, "Oh, that I got to go see that. It's going to show me a new angle on Abraham Lincoln."
Well, let's talk about some pictures that really worked, and let's talk about, why. And we've already mentioned some of them. I mean, certainly Barbie was kind of a breath of fresh air in Hollywood when it came out, coming out of the strike period, when people were wondering when people would go back to the movies after COVID. What would you say was the key? I mean, for me, very charming cast, Margot Robbie, perfectly cast. Would you say the key to the success of this film is?
Well, the key to the success of the movie is without question um, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, who really changed the DNA of the movie. Uh, I work with Mattel very closely, and I had tested much of their IP a few years before Barbie came out. And although it was maybe had the most awareness of any of the properties, that and Hot Wheels, I think, uh, there was a basic rejection around it to see it as a feature film. And people were like, this is for, little girls, really young girls, and some nostalgia with some moms. But there had been some lousy home videos on it and remakes of it and direct to video, you know, movies that didn't land and it was just a really flawed IP and it needed to be completely rethought. And I told Robbie Brenner, who runs Mattel, like, run from this property. And she said, Kevin, I can't run from Mattel's largest property. It's just not, I have to make this movie. I said, well, make Magic 8 Ball first, and try to get a $40 million, double as opposed to a home run or even a single. Get a double so that you can continue making movies, get something that is more reliable, right? And I think there was logic in that, but she said I couldn't run from it. So Enon Kreis, who is the CEO, had hired Margot Robbie. I remember being with Margot, not with Margot, but with Tom Ackerley, her husband, at an event with Robbie, and saying, "Look, this has gone twice already. Tried to go with Anne Hathaway and with Amy Schumer, and both times the project never took off, right? And you hired your wife. I mean, they hired your wife, and you, Robbie, and Enon hired, Margot. But there's no idea here. What are you doing? And Margot got the incredible idea of bringing on Greta Gerwig, and Robbie thought that was incredibly interesting. And when they met in New York at this, I think it was a brownstone where it was Robbie and Margot and Tom and Noah and of course Greta. And they sat there, and Greta said, I see this somewhere between a stiletto and a Birkenstock. And suddenly they all went, yeah. And that really changed what we know as Barbie. I mean, Margot Robbie embodies, I think, better than anybody what we think we know of Barbie. Of course, there's been a million iterations along the way with all kinds of, astronaut Barbie and President Barbie and, disabled Barbie and, everything in between. But the idea of creating all these different Barbies that presented women empowerment really changed the DNA. Of course, if you really talked to the marketing folks at Mattel, they would talk to you about Barbie always having imbued with those qualities. But the audiences didn't see that. They were
Well,
able to take that and write a script that was funny, irreverent, and talked about sort of the male patriarchy and then turned it on its ear and made the women victorious. And then had that beautiful moment of Rhea Perlman coming in with the essentially the heart of the movie as the creator of this, and it had heart as well. All of those things created a change which I've never seen. I don't think I could ever seen it, not to this level certainly, of changing the inherent value proposition of a piece of IP. And so I've changed my opinion about. I never say never now. I never declare. I say it could be, but you really have some heavy lifting. This could have gone in a very different direction. You know it, I know it, the listeners know it,
sure, sure.
but it didn't.
And being a male, not very interested at all in the Barbie world, but being aware of it, I think that what the studio did was make you aware of it in a campaign on steroids. You couldn't go 2 feet without knowing that Barbie was coming.
Well, that was
And
Josh Goldstein. I mean, he really understood. He leaned into the pink. He leaned into the more importantly, most importantly, that notion that perfection is not real and you should embrace your flaws. And that touched a nerve with a lot of folks, driven by women, but not exclusively women. The exit polls show that plenty of men showed up to that movie.
no, absolutely. Well, the the idea of young women going or little girls going with their moms was a big part of the audience, but that seems to also be a very much a part of why Wicked has become such a huge hit. Now, I love the Wizard of Oz mythos. I've written several ideas about it. Uh, I went to see the original Wicked in tryouts in San Francisco before it
Oh,
went to Broadway. I saw it with Kristen and Adina, and I came away with it lukewarm. I didn't like the songs at all. I come home, my daughter gets the soundtrack. I think she was 8. And all I'm hearing in the house for months is the soundtrack to Wicked. And I began to realize that I completely missed the boat on the target audience for this show. When the movie was announced, I was willing to give it a shot, and I thought the Wicked movie once again was the right filmmaker. I think John Chu, right?
yes, who's by the way a guest on my podcast next week.
Oh well,
And he did the podcast that he recorded it the day Wicked opened to talk about a good friend.
well, that's great. That's a great get for you. I love Wicked. I love that. I've been on a bit of a tear lately on big screen action movies as being too much action, too long. We talked about that last week. This was the perfect amount of time, length, and just a really fun. But again, anchored just like Margot is perfect for Barbie, the two perfect actresses to be in Wicked. It was just perfection.
Just as a teaser, John Chu shared with me that they never did a chemistry test together. He hired
Really?
them each individually and knew that it was going to work. Somehow, some way, he knew. Uh, I think they went to Cynthia first. Um, I think that's what he said. But the point is like you can't even imagine anyone else in the roles now.
Right,
But I have to
right.
say, I agree with you. I was not a huge fan of the show. it's I think the most successful show that's ever been on Broadway now. I think it's actually past Phantom, something like that. But it's enormously successful. And Mark Platt was a genius to see that early on. And then, God love him, he didn't need to do this movie. I mean, it was only something to lose, not necessarily rolling the dice to win. Like he had more to lose than win. And because it was already a major success on the stage and he went for it. And of course, you know, I can't tell you how much I love the first one and how much I love the second one. I think it's really, in a way, if not, it's definitely one of the best pictures of last year and of this year. But the reason I feel that is because the film arts, the art of filmmaking, requires so many gifted artists. And this movie like embodies like so many of those categories, from the production design, the art direction, the casting, the editing, the script, the special effects. It's just such great collaboration with extraordinary folks. And talk about something elevated. I mean, this is extraordinary. And it touches a nerve. Again, let's unpack why is Wicked so universal. And I think it had, no pun intended, the distributor. But I will tell you, I believe it's because of, similar to Barbie, about self esteem, about empowerment, about not being accepted and rejection by people who don't understand um, difference. I have a phrase that I've used with a friend before, which is, you were so different, the kids picked on you. And I said, yeah, because you were so creative, they wanted to slap the different out of you. And that to me is the basis of the genius of Wicked. I think it's about ultimate acceptance and how somebody can turn because it's so hard to go against the grain. Sometimes you just say, screw it, I'm gonna just give them what they want.
And such a perfect message for young women. I mean, it's just like in a way you can see why it was so popular.
And
Also,
Ariana's compassion in the second one towards Elphaba. I mean,
right,
I mean, Galinda's sort of the love of those two, the friendship,
right.
this notion of friendship. And I mean, if you go back to the beginning of the first one and how they just were such polar opposites, you couldn't have more. How many times have you heard that, like with college roommates, like two roommates meet each other and you hear, oh my God, they were so different. My friend Val and Maria Magenti, the writer, Val DePena, were at NYU, and they were on polar opposite. Valerie was like into posters and makeup, and Maria was, down and dirty and writing and more in the sort of the into the whole subculture. And they are still best friends. They're not still, they became best friends, and they are still best friends today because of those differences, because of finding the perfect in them, you know?
Now you mentioned you didn't think they did a chemistry test on Wicked. Was are chemistry tests part of the world you work in? Have you done chemistry tests for studios?
No, no, that's not part of my world, although I'm happy to conduct them. We could conduct them, but that's usually reserved for, they've been doing them since, television pilots would often, this, remember the talent would come in this to a conference room and the heads of the network would be around the table with the creatives and they would see how the actors worked together. And, many times they got it right and sometimes they got it wrong. And after the pilot, they fired the actor, one of the actors or the actress, because wasn't working. So that's not an old concept, but it really resides more with the decision makers.
You know, with all the good research and all the good marketing and all of the good talent, sometimes unforeseen things happen. I'm going to throw up a picture for the people who are watching on YouTube and True TV Plus, a movie that is a bit of a conundrum. It's a movie called The Interview with Seth Rogen. Now, here's a case of here's a comedy that went
I
into.
worked on this movie.
Oh, you did work on this movie.
Yes.
Okay. So
Uh-huh.
this is a movie for those of you who don't know this story. This got very controversial because North Korea was really upset with this American comedy film, so much so that I'm not quite sure of the details, but I know that
Allegedly,
allegedly there was a
what
huge
you're about
hack.
to
There was a
say.
huge hack, and it completely disrupted the studio that released the movie. But whatever you can tell us a little bit about what you know about this movie.
Well, I mean, the movie tested well. People liked it. It was not considered to be all that risky. We have done spoofs out of Hollywood for years and years. Um, and I've heard the same rumors that you have. It was just an unfortunate timing of events where, you know, they probably thought the government was behind it when it was probably Seth and Evan's genius that did it. But it's actually a movie that you should check out because it's funny. But North Korea saw it as a threat, and as you said, allegedly launched this massive hack of Sony's email infrastructure and revealed lots of stuff. I remember I was mentioned only a couple times, and it was pretty innocuous. But you flip out. Uh, if you've been sued before, which I have, and you're in litigation, you're very smart to not memorialize things. You don't write long emails. So it would be very, very unusual if you ever read an email from me, from that I prepared that is longer than a few word response. So
Oh,
great to see you. Thank you. Received. Okay. I actually get a lot of people saying, I'm so glad you have such brevity. The other day I was responding to a board meeting and the head of the board wrote back, this is so refreshing. I guess other people say, well, I'm not really free this time, but I'll be free that. And it was like, okay, you know, thank you for that brevity.
isn't it interesting that those of us who have to deal with a lot of different things are trying to be briefer in our things, and yet sometimes when you want somebody to elaborate, they don't, particularly with lawyers. But you're answering a question I've always had: why are lawyers briefs so their emails so brief? And that explains it. Now, this idea of the interview being impacted by political events is
Yes,
not unprecedented. There's a movie I was going to put up. I think this was before you were into the research phase, but I want to put up a movie
please.
that was very, very highly touted coming out of the box called The Right Stuff.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And The Right Stuff, which was about the first Mercury astronauts, and
This I did
also,
not work on. I think it was before my time.
yes, it was before your time. And what hurt this movie, as I recall, because I'm sure it tested well, and it was considered to be a very important movie, was the fact that one of the astronauts happened to be John Glenn, was running for office, I
Oh,
believe, as a senator. And for some reason, his political campaign got involved with the film release, and people I think, were turned off by that.
wow. I don't remember that. That's very interesting. You think that hurt the film, is what you're saying?
I think it's considered now one of the problems it had because the movie did not open well.
It did not. Interesting. It's because I love that movie. Isn't Ed
It's
Harris in that too? And
yes,
a bunch of
and
great actors.
Sam Shepard,
Oh,
and
geez, yeah.
it was a great movie. You've been involved in. I was going to ask you
Yeah.
because your field is so interesting to me. I don't really know much about it. As far as you know, the idea of testing films using audiences and cards and the whole process. Kevin, how far back does that go? Did the studios back in the 30s, the heyday, the golden age, did they do that?
Well, great question. And the answer is since the beginning of movies, you would have, starting with Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, would take their comedic sequences, let's say 20-minute sequences, bring them up to Hollywood Boulevard to a theater, and would stand in the back, make an arrangement with the theater manager after the movie that was there that people were seeing. Would you mind if Mr. Chaplin plays this afterwards? They would announce, please just stay and watch this, and people would watch it, and they would just listen and hear the reaction, and it helped them cut their movies. cut to the 30s, and George Gallup of the Gallup poll comes into town with David Ogilvy. David Ogilvy worked for George Gallup, and they came in to talk about basically story tests, which is what I do now called capability tests or concept tests, which I talk about a lot in the book, and research screenings. Now, the research screenings were far, far less methodologically advanced, let's just say. They were essentially a postcard that were given to people after the movie, and they would mail them in afterwards, which is unbelievable because they got decent completion rates. But what's interesting is the main measures. I think it was excellent, very good, average, poor, something like that. It's been for years excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. That was there then, as was the definite recommendation. Are you going to tell your friends about the movie? They didn't know from demography. They didn't have, and I'll tell you briefly why that was, meaning gender, age, ethnicity, race. That's a construct of more television advertising years later with Nielsen that came into be and become important. But this notion of getting audience feedback, if you go into the wonderful Margaret Herrick Library on La Cienega in Los Angeles and ask to see preview cards, research cards, you'll see Funny Face and well, that was later, but even earlier, you'll see movies that that's one that I just happen to remember, a movie that I happen to remember, where you can see the card created and some comments, but screenings were done by all the moguls. A very famous screening was Gone with the Wind, of course, in 1938. It came out in 39, but in 38 they tested it and had two caravans allegedly of of executives because the press was all over it. Like they wanted to know something about it. Very akin to a later story called The Titanic, when we did a very secretive screening of that, and everyone wanted to know where we were going, and people were desperate to sneak in and get a glimpse. And Gone with the Wind, people didn't know what they were seeing. This was told to me by Samuel Goldwyn Jr., who was friends with David O. Selznick, so it came almost firsthand. And they didn't lock the doors, as people said, that they let people in and then lock the doors. They did not do that, but David and Irene did stand in the back of the theater and like nobody left the entire time.
And that is a long movie. That's
Well,
a
there was an
4 hour.
intermission too.
Oh, there
Yeah.
wasn't.
I think
Thank
they left during the
God.
intermission, but my point is it played magically. Titanic was the same thing. People lost their minds when I went down to the front of that theater and introduced you're not here to see great expectations as they were led to believe they were there to see, but rather to see what you're about to see. And people were like, what? The waves come on in the first shot, the kind of the underwater, and people were like, is this the trailer? Is this, when they realized they were there to see Titanic, it was a thunderous applause. And of course, the movie scored incredibly well.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very much I use those as parallel stories. And I think of movies like today. What are those movies today? I guess it would be like an Avatar or a Wicked. When I announced on Wicked for Good, we tested it in Arizona, and the studio's given me permission to talk about this. We tested it in Arizona, and we tested it what we call blind. People didn't know what they were coming to see. I think people.
We used to call that a sneak preview.
Well, here's the thing. It was kind of like that. They knew it was a research screening. They knew they were coming there to see an unreleased movie, and there was a qualifier list. So there were musicals on there. So I think people sensed that it could be Wicked, but we filled the audience. It was 400, 500 people. I went down to the front of the theater and I said, may I have your attention, please? I am so thrilled to announce that you are the first audience to see. I couldn't even get the word out. I was the thunderous applause and reaction literally through my body almost to the screen. And I finally said, let me finish. Wicked for good. And another thunderous applause. Anyway, it was one of those great nights where the scores, if it's even possible, I think were higher than the first. And it was just it was magical to be part of that. And I have had the great good fortune of being at the first screening of Borat. Who would think? But the first time you saw it, it was so unusual and so funny. People were doing waves. Same with something. There's something about Mary or even 300. Like no one had seen that visual style. Oh, excellent. You have a picture of it there. No one had seen that visual style before, And suddenly they're like, this is cool. Who's this Zack Snyder? And again, just incredible to witness something where you don't have any expectations at all.
Here's a movie that threw me, and I to this day I don't quite understand it. And by the way,
Everything, everywhere, all at once is what you're
exactly.
looking at. Yeah.
I light a candle to anybody who can get anything made because I know the difficult road. But this one threw me. Um, did you work on this one?
I did not.
You did not. Okay. So
But
I
I
mean,
actually, I actually loved it for a few reasons as a research example,
okay.
because it was polarizing. People loved it or kind of hated it. No one was like, yeah, I liked it. Now, when I heard that reaction, and fortunately more people loved it than hated it, when I heard that reaction, I said, this is very interesting. This movie is going to go the distance because people that loved it were so passionate about it. It was so elevated. And if they didn't, I'd rather stand for something and piss off a portion of the audience than try to be vanilla to more people who are never going to see the movie. So, in a way, it was a great exercise to unpack it and really try to
Oh
understand.
yeah, yeah. I hated it, but that doesn't mean anything.
No, my husband was not a fan either, and I loved it. And I said, "This is so creative." I feel that is a little bit like, certainly no haters really, but on the Paul Thomas Anderson movie that's out.
Yeah, it's my favorite movie of the
It's
season. It's
it's
just,
it's mine too, I think, because it's so unique. It's so the voice, the style of it is just like incredibly original. And when
oh,
I hear the response from people, they don't just say I liked it. They say I loved it or it was my favorite movie of the season. Same with Sinners. Ryan Coogler is going to be a guest in a couple of weeks on my podcast, Don't Kill the Messenger. But he and I worked on that movie. He has a singular voice. He has a particularity, a style that he unleashed on us. It's really like two movies.
oh no, it's entirely. It kind of. I kept on wondering, am I in the right theater? Is this going to be a vampire movie or
That's
what?
hysterical.
It's very good. Now, another movie that I wasn't necessarily the target audience for, but I really enjoyed, and you talk about it in your book, was The Woman King. Um, I thought that was a movie that generally I like historical pieces, and
Yes.
Viola Davis is a force.
Oh,
Uh, just a very entertaining movie.
I love this movie. I loved it for a lot of reasons. Okay, I loved it because I love women kicking ass. I love badass women. I love the fact that it was a piece of history that none of us kind of really knew, and it was brought to the forefront. So that was amazing to work on that. And Gina Prince Blythewood is so talented, and the producers were exceptional, and it just sort of it went through iterations in the testing process to try to find its absolute best version to appeal to the largest number of folks. And And that was really, I think, a very helpful
Oh,
process.
sure. Well, again, I will mention the book because the book is so much fun for
You're
all
so nice, Steve.
well, for for so many different audiences. Filmmakers. Being a filmmaker, I just found it to be fascinating and just a lot of fun. We could probably go another hour, Kevin, because I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you got into research, but that'll be for another
Will
time.
be for another show. But I do want to
Definitely.
say that you're absolutely right. The book was designed to obviously talk about Hollywood and my lens. But it really applies to anyone who's an entrepreneur who is about to launch a new product. And before you launch it, you got to ask the right questions. You got to make sure that you have audience research. Look, art is very personal and does not involve, nor should it involve, an audience. That's between the creator, you, Steve, the writer, and the universe, the gods, whatever. But the moment you sort of memorialize that with a treatment, a script, a beat sheet, whatever it might be, bring the audience in and get the feedback as to how they're reacting to it so you can assess how large this can be or not large it can be. Having worked on over 5,000 movies, I can tell you without question, there is always an audience for a movie. It might be an audience of one or 100, but shame on you if you don't know that and you're budgeting it for a movie that is going to be seen by 10 million.
That's great. That's a great point. We have been listening to the very fascinating Kevin Goetz and talking about a world which I love movies. I never stop loving talking about movies, particularly movies that we all get passionate about. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer's Ben Shrewsbury. And if you like our show, please give us a thumbs up if you can. You can write comments. I also have another podcast I co-host with Julian Schlossberg and Arthur E. Friedman, Tales from Hollywoodland. And Kevin's appearance on that show is coming up soon as well. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Been my absolute pleasure, Steve, and I wish you great good luck on your next comedy.
Thank you. I'll need it. Take care, everyone.